Thank you, Ro. As Ro said, I'm Maria Isabel, or Marisa for short. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland, and this is work we've been doing with Dr. Katie Shilton as part of the Trails Institute work. So as we've all said so far, a big goal for actors and regulators and citizens is to have trustworthy AI so far, which is just to make sure that we're building and maintaining systems that deserve the trust of the public. And that has been a goal we've set all this week, so I'm not going to stop there. But an important part of here is that this has been set as a way to do it through a risk framework. How do we diminish risks? And a way to attack that goal has been through participation. And participation can be democratizing and trust enhancing, but also it can also be used as participatory washing, because not all participation is the same, and we can just put a seal of approval and say we are doing participatory methods, and then use that as a band-aid or a fig leaf to just kind of cover all these algorithmic harms that we are seeing and experiencing. And it is also important to note that participation is not a synonym for trustworthiness. It doesn't mean that when we do participation, then we are achieving trustworthiness or trust. It's a process, as we have all seen and discussed through the week. There is a million ways you can go about trust, but we chose this framework from Hoff and Bashir's from 2015 because we think it works best with automation. And basically, they define or they categorize trust in 3 buckets. Dispositional trust, which is based on a person's culture and personality. Situational trust, which is based on factors like risk and context. And then learned trust, which is based on experiences users have with the AI system. And our premise is that participatory AI can influence both trustworthiness and trust, especially in the situational and learned components. That's why we decided to do a project that analyzed 95 global initiatives that did participatory methods, and we wanted to understand what were their frameworks or motivations for doing participation, what were the methods they were using when they did participation, and then what about these methods, these frameworks, these contexts tell us about how we can increase trust and trustworthiness in AI. If you're interested in our data set, you can scan the QR code and look at it. But basically, we didn't aim to do like a super inclusive data set of participatory projects, because you all know how hard that can be, and it's like the rabbit hole, right? But we did an ample search that went beyond academic context. We looked into Google, YouTube presentations, a lot of NGOs, white papers, or projects, because we wanted to throw the net as far as possible to find all of these approaches and initiatives that did participation in many ways. And then we stopped including projects when they didn't offer a novel method or a novel region or country or framework. We also did try to include the global majority in our project. I speak Spanish as my first language, so that was an advantage, but when we were trying to find projects in Africa or Asia, we were limited to English. A little bit of French I speak, but that's not good enough when you're trying to cast the net open. So that's, of course, a limitation we have. And then we classified our projects by region, actors, institutes, their objectives, their methods, and their frameworks. And what we found was a very fragmented participatory landscape. Our data collection was between 2023 and 2024. So the first big group, 38% of the cases, were focusing on governance. And I think that aligns with the current scenario, right? Plenty of countries were trying to regulate, create sandboxes or spaces for these conversations to happen. So this reflects that moment in time. But then we found very interesting projects, like the case of the FAIR Network in Latin America that's using participatory feminism to deploy or to create a way to interact with artificial intelligence, or projects in Africa that have a data colonialism approach that want to make sure that, for instance, their languages are protected and properly represented in LLM models, and are super against what they called academic dropping or participation dropping, which is we come here, we take your stuff, we extract it, and then we use it. So a very important aspect in their work was you have to be from a region, you have to understand our context and our language, and then maybe we can collaborate. So that was very interesting to see. But what was a little bit more disheartening was that the methods used are mostly traditional methods from the HCI space. And this is good in the sense that these are good and proven methods that have worked before for many, many, many years. But they might not be good enough for the AI landscape because it's different, right? Human-computer interaction takes us just so far, and then we have the monster of AI in general. And this is what we found interesting. 50% of the projects rely on 6 methods, and that's it. So this is an area of opportunity for us. So seeing this gap, we proposed the idea of shared tasks, which we define as concrete and collaborative points of intervention where participation meets the technical pipeline. And we created this pipeline based on Holdome's life cycle of an LLM, and we tried to create some other buckets that represent the life cycle of AI more broadly, and try to find concrete spaces where participation can interact. So I don't know if this is big enough. I hope you see it. If not, please go to the paper and just zoom in. But we created these shared tasks in different parts of the AI pipeline, right? So for instance, when you're formulating a project, we see trust elements that reflect knowledge of impact. So when users understand impact, they gain trust. And then we see elements of trustworthiness like values. They make sure their values are seen when you are posing the problem. We also see an example on the model selection, training, and improvement. We have elements of trust because users have knowledge of the risks and the performance, and elements of trustworthiness because there's functionality and acceptability. And maybe in auditing, we have elements of trust because users see the knowledge of risks and the performance of the models, and they can understand how good a model is for my task or my desire, right? Instead of seeing models as Delphi oracles. And then we have trustworthy elements like acceptability or relationship with them. And these are just some of the examples we found. So for problem formulation, we have the Indigenous Protocol for Artificial Intelligence. And this is a very interesting project because their first question is, how can indigenous logics and frameworks and ways of seeing the world can influence the development of AI models, and how can we do that? So this created a series of trust values for this community when engaging with technology. We also have an example of auditing, which is the Hack the Future event at DEF CON in Las Vegas, where different stakeholders got together from government, hackers, and citizens, a lot of students, to just try to break these LLMs that were participating in the hacking event. And this created elements of trust because you could see how far you could take a model, where their weak points was, and it was a very transparent space where users could see how different participants broke the system and where the holes were. And then we have an example of training and improvement, which is this project that they created. It's called the sepsis model, where a company paired with a hospital in the US to develop a system that detects sepsis earlier. And it was very interesting because it was developed with doctors in the training process and the model process, but then the design was developed with nurses. So it reflected the way they engage with patients in a critical moment. And this created high levels of trust within the community, and it's a model that's still used in the hospital. So what we can see from our conclusion is that AI is not a monolith. It needs to be understood in context. And this is how we can build trust, because trust is a socio-technical relationship that is created through people, right? And participatory AI enables this trust as a relationship. But trustworthiness is not a relationship between people, it's a characteristic of systems. And we see that participatory AI is great to build trustworthiness, but extremely expensive to build trust, especially if the model changes over time. So as a field, we have this challenge to find novel avenues to build everlasting trust, if that is even a thing in our area. And I invite you to look at the paper. Thank you so much.